Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever actually stopped to consider just how much history is happening while, say, you're hanging out at a backyard barbecue? Today, we're doing something a little different. We're looking at one highly specific, incredibly historic 24-hour window, July 4th, 2026. By examining the exact same global news cycle, we're going to see how massive national celebrations on one side of the world stand in stark contrast to geopolitical shifts, active conflicts, and serious humanitarian crises happening at the exact same moment everywhere else. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick roadmap for our global tour today. First, America's 250th anniversary. Then, geopolitics and shifting power. After that, migration and humanitarian crises. Then we'll hit active conflicts and security, and finally, health and environmental action. Let's get started.
Section 1, America's 250th Anniversary. So this day was shaped by some completely unprecedented events and, honestly, some pretty wild weather. We're talking about the nation's most ambitious celebration since 1976, the semi-quintennial, which, let's be real, is just a very fancy word for a 250th birthday. Up in New York City, breaking a massive, long-standing tradition, Times Square hosted its first-ever daytime ball drop at exactly 2 p.m. Eastern. Why p.m.? Because that is the precise historical moment the Declaration of Independence was actually adopted back in 1776. Pretty cool, right? But Mother Nature decided to crush the party. By early evening down in Washington, D.C., severe thunderstorms forced thousands of people on the National Mall to evacuate and take emergency shelter in federal buildings. They eventually got the gates reopened late that Saturday night, with President Trump actually delaying his keynote address until 11 p.m. And the reason for that delay was just to make absolutely sure that the massive fireworks display could still go on for the country. Meanwhile, just up the coast, the sheer scale of the celebrations was literally massive. New York Harbor hosted a historic international naval and aerial review. This was all part of their flagship Sail Forth and Freedom 250 events. Just imagine the sight. You've got a fleet of roughly 100 U.S. and allied naval warships, joined by 30 international tall sailing ships, all just parading right through New York Bay. And at the exact same time, if you looked up, viewers saw this massive flyover. Over 100 military aircraft roaring up the Hudson River, all led by the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. Just an absolute spectacle. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark thematic contrast to all those massive military displays. Down in Maryland, Governor Wes Moore delivered a really profound thought during his Independence Day address. He was cautioning against political polarization, and he said this: "Patriotism wants you to build something bigger than yourself, but nationalism emboldens people to feel bigger than somebody else." It's a super compelling idea, especially when delivered right in the middle of such a monumental, historic milestone. Section 2, Geopolitics and Shifting Power. Shifting our focus down to South America, two massive political shifts happened on this exact same day, drastically reshaping the regional landscape. Over in Argentina, President Javier Milei aggressively wiped out the Interior Ministry by executive decree. This wasn't a minor tweak. This was a sweeping reorganization that shifted the ministry's core national responsibilities straight into the cabinet chief's office as part of his state consolidations. And on that very same day, right next door in Peru, Roberto Berneo, the president of their National Jury of Elections, formally certified Keiko Fujimori as their new president. Having secured over 50% of the vote in the runoff, she officially locked in her presidency for the 2026 to 2031 term. It's just a prime example of how quickly the geopolitical map can be redrawn and impact global stability in literally a single afternoon. Meanwhile, half a world away in the Middle East, a very, very different kind of geopolitical transition was underway. Formal funeral ceremonies commenced in Tehran for the late Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. High-ranking international delegations gathered for this really somber event. And July 4th actually marked the very beginning of the official mourning processions, which were scheduled to run all the way through July 9th across major religious hubs. We're talking places like Qom, Mashhad, and various locations over in Iraq. And right against the backdrop of those exact funeral processions, regional tensions were really heating up. Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council sharply denounced an unauthorized landing of an Iranian civilian aircraft at the Houthi-controlled Sana'a International Airport. Yemen officially condemned this as a flagrant violation of their national sovereignty. But, on the flip side, the Houthis claim that their air defense forces actively intercepted Saudi warplanes that were allegedly trying to block that Iranian plane from arriving. It's a really stark reminder of the volatile airspace and the incredibly complex security dynamics constantly unfolding in that region. Section 3, Migration and Humanitarian Crises. Let's lower the tone just a bit to look at a highly symbolic move. While we saw Western border crackdowns happening globally, Pope Leo XIV chose to spend his 4th of July on the Sicilian island of Lampedusa. The American-born pontiff actually laid wreaths at a migrant cemetery and celebrated a solemn mass. His presence there and his message heavily emphasized the Christian obligation to protect vulnerable refugees who are actively fleeing war and climate change. It drew the world's eyes right back to the ongoing human toll of global migration. Now, take a look at this number, 2,650. That is the exact number of Afghan prisoners officially repatriated by Iran on this specific day. Both Afghan and Iranian authorities confirmed the orderly transfer of these detainees back to their home country. This movement was actually the execution of provisions laid out in a long-standing bilateral prisoner exchange pact. It represents a massive piece of logistical and humanitarian coordination between those two nations.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this all builds. Active conflicts and security. 21. This marks the staggering 21st time the embattled Zaporizhia nuclear power plant completely lost its primary offsite power supply, at least according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, why does this matter? It's absolutely crucial for global stability because whenever this happens, the facility is forced to rely entirely on emergency backup generators just to protect its critical cooling systems. It vividly and honestly kind of terrifyingly highlights the incredibly fragile state of global energy infrastructure when it gets caught in the crossfire of the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian war. And speaking of that exact conflict, 72. That is the massive number of Ukrainian drones intercepted in just one single swarm. Regional Governor Alexander Drozdenko reported that Russian air defense forces shot down these 72 drones over the Leningrad region early that Saturday morning. And this all occurred right alongside statements from President Putin, who confirmed that the establishment of a cross-border security buffer zone was, quote, proceeding as planned. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Health and Environmental Action. So the crucial point here is that while bombs were falling in Eastern Europe, other nations were busy drafting long-term futures. On this exact same day, July 4th, China's State Council actually greenlit a massive roadmap for environmental and ecological engineering. It's known as the Beautiful China Action Plan, and it spans their 15th five-year plan period from 2026 to 2030. This comprehensive roadmap mandates strict decarbonization targets, and it implements these really systemic green industrial upgrades across their entire economy. It signals a major structural shift toward environmental engineering for the whole back half of the decade. But while long-term plans are being drafted for tomorrow, immediate health emergencies are taking lives today. And the data here brilliantly illustrates just how severe the situation is. The World Health Organization sounded severe alarms over an active Ebola epidemic in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. By this date, the outbreak officially hit 1,502 confirmed cases, with 473 deaths. It prompted some incredibly urgent calls for a much, much faster deployment of regional medical aid to try and contain the deadly spread. So we've just traveled all the way across the globe looking at one single shared 24-hour window on July 4th, 2026. On one hand, you have daytime ball drops and spectacular aerial reviews celebrating 250 years of American history. But then you flip the channel, right? And you see state ministries being dissolved overnight, massive funeral processions for supreme leaders, desperate pleas to help refugees, fragile nuclear infrastructure failing for the 21st time, and active viral outbreaks claiming hundreds of lives. It really forces us to ask a profound question. Amidst the fireworks, the funerals, the dissolved ministries, and the drone swarms, how will history ultimately judge this single day on our shared timeline? Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep asking those big questions, keep looking at the bigger picture, and I'll see you next time.